I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. Over the next 2 or 3 videos I want to talk about a horror film series that was formative for me as a young boy. The first films that I saw that truly gave me the feeling that I was being transgressive, that I was watching films that were intended for people much older than me. I've told the story previously on the channel and I'm going to tell it again in a couple of minutes, but let's get down to it. First of the 3, from 1976, it's Richard Donner's The Omen. In very broad strokes, it's widely accepted that at the tail end of the 60s and certainly into the 70s, the crown of horror cinema was unceremoniously yanked from British heads and placed firmly on the bonds of the United States of America. A sea change in horror cinema was taking place, and while Hammer Studios persisted Canute-like to try and turn back the tide, the revolution was over. Among young game-changing upstarts like George A. Romero with Night of the Living Dead and Tobe Hooper with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the dark coronation of American horror cinema was trumpeted by a loose trio of Devil Child movies: Rosemary's Baby in 1968, The Exorcist in 1973, and The Omen a few years later in 1976. I think it's safe to say that The Omen was sort of a big studio bandwagon jumper following the success of its 2 predecessors, and not exactly indie movies themselves, but certainly retaining indie or art house sensibilities. Unlike the exercising paranoia of Rosemary's Baby and the taut, deadly serious meditation on the nature of faith in the face of evil of The Exorcist, The Omen really plays to the crowds. It's the arena rock show of the Devil Child trio. No less po-faced, but much, much more fun. I don't want to leave you under any illusions. It might be creaky in places, it might be a little bit hokey, but I fucking love The Omen. Back when I was around 9, 10, 11, my mum had a Saturday job. So on Saturdays, my dad looked after me and my younger brother. And one of the ways he did this, after we went to our karate lessons, was that he would let us watch the horror movies he'd taped off the telly the preceding week. The schooling that we had was phenomenal and practically chronological. I started off with the likes of Nosferatu, the early 1930s Universal monster movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman. We moved on to Hammer and Amicus, and then one Saturday afternoon, as he was taking the blank VHS tape and slotting it into the machine, as was our ritual at the time, he turned around and over his shoulder he said, "Don't tell your mother." And I knew that something special was about to happen. I just didn't quite know what. He hit play, and the movie we were going to watch started. And then I heard Jerry Goldsmith's Ave Satani, and I can recall shouting out, "It's The Omen!" I have no idea how at 10 or 11 I knew that it was The Omen. I guess I must have read the books, but we sat down, we shut up, and we watched The Omen. And I think they were showing on Channel 4. And the next week, Damien Omen 2. And the week after that, The Final Conflict. I can still recall the excitement, the probably slight disbelief that this was happening, and keeping my trap shut and paying attention because I wanted to be able to watch the whole film from start to finish, and I didn't want anything to break the spell that was happening. This was a proper grown-up horror movie. This was The Omen. I was being allowed to watch The Omen. God damn right I wasn't going to tell my mother. That opening credits choral music kicking in is one of my absolute greatest and most cherished horror memories. So it's probably a great time to talk about Jerry Goldsmith's score. It won him the only Oscar of his career, and what a way to bag the new bald gold guy. over 40 years later, and doom-laden choral Latin is still a byword for unstoppable satanic forces. It's hard to get past Goldsmith's opening banger, Ave Satani. Even watching the film for the umpteenth time last night, I turned to my partner during the opening credits and said, "This is how you do it. This is how you start a horror movie." But the true success of the score is light and shade, and I don't think the bombast would work nearly so well without the delicate love theme for Cathy and Robert Thorne, which slowly turns sour over the course of the film. The inevitability of descent into the diabolical is tracked in the music, so much so that when the Latin choir kicks in again over the final shot and the end credits, it's a death knell for hope. Either the slab finally being pulled over your tomb or an air-punching hurrah for Team Lucifer. And while it's true that the Omen sits firmly within this new wave of US horror, I think time has also been kind to it because it's a little bit throwbacky. To my mind, there is a whiff of Hammer Studios about it, and that's not just the British setting, which certainly helps. It's more the plethora of plummy British thesps who inject the proceedings with a studied earnestness that the material perhaps doesn't deserve. In the hysterical entreaties of Patrick Troughton, the piercing maleficence of Billy Whitelaw, the dire warnings of Leo McKern, and the steady, gorgeously enunciated exposition of David Warner, we find connective tissue to the work of Michael Ripper, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and the wonderful roster of Hammer and Amicus players. And this might just be me, but the shabby clown at Damien's birthday party and the sudden tree-shaking wind that springs up around Father Brennan remind me also of the fantastic 1957 film Night of the Demon, which I've talked about previously on this channel. The sterling work of those British actors doesn't mean our American leads are out of their depth at all, no siree. Lee Remick and Gregory Peck as Cathy and Robert Thorne are the real pole stars to this. The lightning rods that cement all the histrionics, ground it into a reality that Gregory Peck tries far too hard to hold on to. This thing that he did, switching his dead child at birth for another orphan child, the secret he kept 5 years previously, burning him with a guilt that clamps his mouth shut even when his wife is telling her psychiatrist things like she doesn't believe that Damien is hers, things that he knows to be true but doesn't want to admit. This man's pride and his guilt, and I wouldn't go so far as to say he was gaslighting Cathy, but trying to continually protect her. Even in the opening, he's protecting her from the reality he's being presented with, that their child has died. She can't take it, she can't cope. And now 5 years later, she can't cope with the truth if I tell her the truth, even though it's the truth that's driving her insane. This is his fatal flaw, this drive to protect his wife from the truth, thinking that she's too weak to handle it. Oh, my friend, you should have chosen door number 2. I guarantee she's strong enough to have handled the truth, and she probably might have even got you out of the pile of shit you found yourself in. But then we wouldn't have had the movie. So while Gregory Peck is appropriately stoic, it's the clear-eyed, blonde, corn-fed Lee Remick that really tugs at the heartstrings here. Everyone around her knows what's going on apart from her, and it's her that's being driven insane by it, her being put in harm's way because of it, and just a few well-timed admissions, a few steps taken a little earlier could have saved her. She dies never knowing the truth, whilst Robert watches her die because he spends far too long denying the truth. And finally, we have little Harvey Spencer Stevens, who got the gig as Damien by punching director Richard Donner in the balls during his audition. The Omen is going to stand or fall by how you cast Damien, as the 2006 remake proves beyond a shadow of a doubt. And Harvey Spencer Stevens gives, I don't know if he's acting or that was just his nature, he's giving light and shade to Damien. At times, Damien, he's just a kid. And you're constantly asking yourself, does he know what's going on, or is Damien a pawn as well? Damien, like everyone else, is a piece on the chessboard, and it's the devil that's moving everything around. And there's a sense, certainly in this and Damien Omen 2, Damien's just collateral as well for larger forces that are swirling around him. But there are times when this little boy is acting like a little shit. I mean, when Cathy is there going, I don't think I can take any more. When he's at the pool table, snooker table, pew, 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 making all, I don't think there's a parent that hasn't been there. To modernise the Omen, I guess, might seem a little fusty, a little slow in places. The investigation into the truth doesn't kick in till the hour mark, when Robert Thorne finally hooks up with the journalist Jennings, David Warner, and they go on their investigation. The narrative does kick up a gear, but I've got so much time for the Omen for so many reasons. The first genuine thrill of watching something forbidden. I know that's a feeling that all of you horror lovers understand, and I know it's a feeling that we continue to chase to this day. A genuine thrill of horror at such a young age. A Catholic upbringing made the events of the Omen seem scarily plausible. Heck, you only have to turn to the back of any Bible and you can see the proof for yourself there in black and white. The Book of Revelations. Oh my God, it's all true. The Omen introduced me to the work of David Warner, and that's an incalculable debt I'll never be able to pay. And so many moments watching it again really was like seeing a hoary old rock band on the road one more time and playing only their greatest hits. It's all for you, Damien. That stunt where the first nanny hangs herself is so brutal in its matter-of-factness. Better than the most expensive CG could ever be, and the beatific look on her face before she jumps still sends chills down me. Billy Whitelaw is malevolent with a look. Poorly Remick struggling with her 90. That sequence honestly made me panic for years if ever I struggled to get a jumper or a shirt over my head. Mrs. Blaylock was suddenly there in the room with me. The glorious death scenes, which would become more elaborate in the sequels, when you can draw a line straight from the Omen death scenes to the Final Destination movies. And Jennings' death, so shocking for my 11-year-old self. Such a great piece of grand guignol when his head comes spinning off, played in slow motion over and over again from all the angles they filmed it at. And finally, I think it's the iconography of the film that's part of its longevity, why it's survived. The 666 birthmark, the daggers of Megiddo, the Rottweiler familiar, Damien on his tricycle, the photographs being developed showing how each person will die. And while the two sequels are more or less successful, neither hits the great heights of the original film. However, they both do excel in building upon and evolving the iconography from the Omen. But that's a subject for the next two videos.